Now, it's only been a few weeks of a Labour government, but already this country is about to be given a fat slap in the face by the politics of envy. It was all going so well, wasn't it? Pro-growth policies, commitments to spend billions on projects to make Britain great again, and undoing 14 years of Tory mess in a very expensive clean-up operation. Remember, all costed, of course.
Only a Labour government has a fully costed and fully funded plan to get that much-needed investment in.
Well, now the honeymoon's over. The tax raids are coming. This Monday, Chancellor Rachel Reeves is expected to announce that Labour has turned up to government and found a £20 billion financial black hole in the books. A shocking discovery, they will insist. How could the Tories have been so irresponsible? Labour will claim that after discovering what's really been going on inside government, their extravagant spending plans, including giving public sector workers inflation-busting pay rises, are about to become even more difficult. And because of the frivolous Tories, no doubt we'll see painful tax rises in the coming autumn budget. But let me tell you, that narrative doesn't wash. In this country, we have a thorough and transparent assessment of fiscal events by the Office for Budget Responsibility. Labour knew about this. Even the Institute for Fiscal Studies has been warning of a £20 billion black hole for months on end. So the narrative that this comes as a big surprise is a lie. And here's the bombshell proof. In an interview with the Financial Times on June the 16th, Rachel Reeves admitted that unlike previous incoming chancellors, she'd be unable to arrive at the Treasury and claimed she'd looked at the books and realised things were worse than expected, giving a weak excuse for tax rises or spending cuts. In her own words, she said, "We've got the OBR now. We know things are in a pretty bad state. You don't need an election to find out." So there we have it, a £20 billion porky pie. So much for promising no new tax workers on working people.
We have been really clear that we're not raising income tax, national insurance or VAT. All of our plans are fully funded and don't require tax rises over and above what we've already set out.
So come the budget in October, Labour will no doubt hike up capital gains tax to even more eye-watering levels, choosing to hit those with the bravery and foresight to invest in assets, stocks, housing and commodities with even bigger penalties. And of course, at the same time, those who aren't even meant to be in the country at all will enjoy free housing, NHS care, access to dentistry and Home Office pocket money each week to have a jolly good time with. They'll also no doubt hike inheritance tax because nothing says aspiration, of course, quite like taxing the dead while they're 6 feet under on assets they've grafted all their life for to leave to their children. Labour have already proven themselves dishonest. And if they're just going to drag everyone down to their envious level, what's the point anymore? We may as well sit around in our underpants watching loose women while hoping we're not the next victim of a stabbing spree or counting the number of small boat arrivals to England each day. More than 1,500 since Labour took power, by the way, but don't talk about that, you bigots. But let's get the thoughts now of my panel. Former BBC political chief John Sargent, political consultant Suzanne Evans, and entrepreneur and social commentator Joanna Jarju. Let me get my running boots on panel. Good evening to you.
Evening.
John Sargent, let's start with you. That is bombshell proof, is it not? That Financial Times interview from Rachel Reeves saying we can't just turn up to government and say that it's worse than expected because we've got the OBR now. They're a bunch of liars, aren't they?
Well, you can call them a bunch of liars. I call them a bunch of politicians. It's, in fact, one of the oldest sort of manoeuvres in politics is that you make sure that you keep your own plans. The plans you announce, you've got a cost. But the other plans, well, actually then happens, the events then happen, you've got to have money for that. And they can then say, well, we looked at the books, and the books are worse than we thought. Everyone expected this. The Institute for Fiscal Studies suggested it. We all knew it was likely to happen. And when they were questioned in detail during the election campaign, they didn't say there will be no increase of tax of any sort. They said, we're not going to do VAT, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that. So I'm afraid it was a manoeuvre which we can expect, but it's the old...
Do you not agree it's completely dishonest?
Well, you can
you
can say politics is completely dishonest. They had to win the election. They want to win the election. They thought we'd get away with it by not being too specific. But also, what they didn't want to do was, why waste a crisis? The government is in a crisis now about public spending. Make sure the blame is firmly on the government that's just left. That's just what happens. It's what politicians will always do. Don't be surprised.
The thing is, though, John, You know, Ben's absolutely right. Rachel Reeves gave this interview, this Financial Times. She said, politicians have always done exactly what you've just suggested. We make out that things are worse than we thought when we get into office. We blame the previous government. I can't do that. She put her hands up. She said, I can't do that. So here we are. You know, so what have we got? A situation where they talk about lies, damned lies, statistics, and Rachel Reeves claimed that she didn't know. Of course she flipping well knew.
I know.
And what's worse about this is she's now saying, the government's now saying, we're going to make sure that the Office for Budget Responsibility reviews every major tax and spending plan.
Yeah.
Well, why is she giving power to such a super organisation, presumably, if what she's saying now is true, you can only conclude they were asleep on the job?
No, because you've just got to realise that what happened, particularly in the last time this happened, which was when Gordon Brown was the Prime Minister and the international economic crisis took place. And was anyone saying, oh, this is an international problem? Oh, no, Gordon Brown's problem. And, of course, so the Conservatives know all about this. They've done it plenty of time themselves.
Joanna, the point is Labour have been caught with their pants down. They've specifically said, we cannot do this. We cannot waltz into Downing Street and say that it's worse than expected. They've literally just done that. It's just insane.
Look, Ben, if you were saying this to me in 2 weeks' time, after she's actually made some sort of announcement, then I'd be saying, absolutely right, she can't go back on it.
But
the key thing is they said she's expected to reveal that.
And she will.
And realistically, yes, that's going to be a part of it, and maybe she would have, you know, had this in mind to say, we already knew that the OBR said this 20 billion, but also there's been other things that have been revealed over the last week or so, like Yvette Cooper in the House of Commons was talking about the Rwanda plan, the fact that the government have already spent 700 million on it and they intended to spend 10 million over the next 5 years. So it's things like that. No, but it's things like, at the end of the day, there are certain things that they would have had, you know, been privy to in terms of information, and it would have been certain things.
Not 20 billion pounds worth. Rwanda's.
No, but the OBR was saying that. But what I'm saying is that in terms of the actual cost of what the government has paid of our money over the last 2.5 years of Rwanda, they weren't willingly saying that to Parliament. They weren't willingly saying that to us about 700.
Labour have been caught with their pants down, and you're just shifting the.
I'm not shifting the blame. The blame lies somewhere very, very specific, and it's with the people who have been in government over the last 14 years. If there's blame, who else would they blame?
The other big, and I'm like John, I'm very nervous about calling politicians liars. But here is a massive lie, is the lie that they're saying that the finances are worse at any time than since World War II. That is an abject, clear nonsense. You know, when Margaret Thatcher came to power, inflation was 8.3%. It's just 2% now. Harold Wilson, it was 15.5%. It's just 2% now, obviously. You know, they're talking about unemployment being bad. Well, no. In 2010, it was 4.4%. Sorry, now it's 4.4%. It was 7.8% in 2010. The economy has been, you know, it's much better than it has been on numerous occasions.
To Margaret Thatcher, you know, because
nonsense.
people always regard her as being absolutely sort of rigidly, absolutely sort of brilliantly sort of truthful. In the 1979 election, she said, we're not going to put up taxes, implying we won't put up income tax. When they got into power, within days, they doubled VAT. Doubled VAT.
John, can I just say...
From 7.5% to 15%. That's what politicians do.
I've just put attention back to the Tories. I'm talking about this Labour administration who virtue signal about public service and honesty and being good politicians, and within a couple of weeks, they've just... I'll say it, it's a lie.
The other thing that worried me about Labour before the election was they never once mentioned spending cuts. Not once. She also said her manifesto would be fully costed. I laughed my head off because I knew it wouldn't be.
And they're going to hike capital gains tax.
Are we getting to a stage, seriously, when politics is so bad now that a party puts forward a political manifesto before a general election and everybody knows they're going to rip it up once they get it?
But the thing is, they have also put red lines. If I come back next week and they've, you know, put up VAT or national insurance or income tax, then I will completely hold my hands up to any of you. But the point is, they have made clear red lines. If they do put up capital gains tax, or if they do put up inheritance tax, that's completely different. And actually, when we actually look at it, the amount of money that they're going to raise from that is minimal. So I don't think it's kind of like this big ticket blanket thing that they're going to introduce. If they go outside of those red lines are the things that actually matter for working people. But I think it's also important to kind of acknowledge the fact that taxing assets is completely different from taxing people.
People who pay capital gains tax are working people. They're not some lords who are masquerading around in robes and you know waltzing around in their buy-to-lets. They're hard-working, normal people.
No, but they're going to change maybe who qualifies for it. There are people, in fact, who don't pay at the moment capital gains tax, or they don't pay inheritance tax.
The only
and it's changing those rules.
Gains tax at the moment is if your capital gain is less than £3,000.
Sure.
That's not a massive amount of money.
We've got to move on. Thank you, though. I mean, instead of going after the hard workers who risk their investments on assets, you know, stocks and shares and gold and properties, why don't you stop the £3 billion a year Starmer's pledged to Ukraine or the $84 million they've just promised for Africa and in the Middle East? All about thinking about Brits first instead of the rest of the world. Anyway, thank you very much, panel. We'll be